Episode 6, P.O.W. Flashback to 2 months after the outbreak. We see Sydney and Emma. Emma is aiming her gun towards 2 deadheads coming up the hill. Sydney is watching her and Emma pulls the trigger and misses. Sydney says, "It's alright sis, try again." And Emma looks through the scope real close and fires once again and nails one of the deadheads, and then she has 1 more left, and on her first try she kills the other deadhead. And Sydney says, "Nice shot." We then see them enter a gas station. They kill a few deadheads that are inside, and then they put all the food that they can into their bags and leave. We see the sunset, and then we cut to night. Emma is sitting by the campfire. Sydney comes up and throws a few logs into the fire and asks, "Something wrong, sis?" Emma says, "No, I'm fine. It's just, I'm wondering when we're gonna get out of this nightmare." Sydney hands her some food and Emma thanks her and says, "I guess I'm just scared this will be our lives. Surviving like this day after day until someone eventually kills us." And Sydney says, "Hey, I don't want to ever hear that kind of talk from you again." Emma says, "No, I'm serious. I mean, what are we doing?" Sydney says, "Staying alive. And when we get out of this, we're gonna rebuild a life for ourselves, I promise." And Emma says, "I just hope we get something, an answer, some kind of sign that there's something out there for us." Sydney says, "Look, sis, whatever happens to us, whether we're out here for 2 more days or 2 more years, I'll never let anything happen to you." And Emma says, "That goes for you too." Sydney says, "Protect me? That's sweet, sis, but I don't need anyone to protect me." And Emma says, "Well, either way, I'd take a bullet for you. Just remember that." Currently, Sydney snaps out of it and she says, "It should have been me, sis. It should have." We then hear Luke over the walkie. "Sydney, what's your status?" Sydney pulls herself together and picks up the walkie and says, "Yeah, still looking. How about you guys?" Luke says, "Yeah, we're about to hit the power plant. We'll contact you when it's done." And Sydney says, "Perfect. I'll keep you posted if I find anything." Luke says, "Copy that." And Sydney looks sad, but then starts the car back up, and then she sees it's almost out of gas. She pulls over and steps out of the car and takes out the gas jug out of the trunk and is about to start filling up the car when all of a sudden we hear a gun click behind her. There we see a woman with a fully loaded shotgun pointed towards her and says, "Drop it." And Sydney puts it down and the woman says, "Hands up." And Sydney does as she asks, but the woman says, "Give me your keys." And Sydney says, "Look, I don't want any trouble." And the woman says, "Then we won't have any. Now give me your keys." She cocks the gun and says, "Now this is the last time I'm asking you." And Sydney says, "Look, we can make a deal. You don't need to do this." And the woman looks pissed and says, "Just know, I tried to do this the right way." And she knocks Sydney to the ground and knocks her out. Flashback to day 1 before the outbreak. Sydney is getting ready for work. We see her walk into the kitchen and grab a coffee. We see her mom named Frankie walks in and says, "Oh good, you're not gone yet. Listen, Emma has a half day today, and she's not legally allowed to drive for a few more weeks, and my car is still at the shop, and your lunch hour is at the same time. If it's alright, do you mind? Sydney says, of course, I'll pick her up. Frankie says, thanks, sweetie. You know, having you crash here for a few weeks has been great. Sydney asks, you sure I'm not a burden? Frankie says, no, of course not. Your rent every month was through the roof. Sydney says, well, good thing is, I think I finally found the perfect place, and it's literally only a 5-minute walk to work. And Frankie says, well, thanks for picking her up. And Sydney says, no, it's no problem. And we then see her getting ready for work. We see her driving to work. She's jamming out to some music in her car. But then, we hear the guy on the radio talking about this virus that seems to be spreading. And Sydney rolls her eyes at this and says, oh my god, can you guys talk about something else for a change? And she turns it to another station. She's pulling into work, and we see her parking, as her friend Glenn is also parking next to her, and says, well, good morning, Sydney. Sydney says, Glenn, I see you're here on time. Glenn says, well, the boss is thrilled. Sydney says, yeah, I know, he told me. They caught another viper last night. Glenn says, yeah, the boss thinks that we're getting ever closer to finding their leader. And Sydney says, well, so far we've taken down 5, this one being 6. And Glenn says, yeah, well, we better get in there. The meeting starts in a few minutes. We see everyone sitting down, and their boss walks in and says, all right, good morning, everyone. As you may have heard, we have found another one of these vipers. We have more leads from a few of you that I'll get to, so I'll be speaking to a few of you later today. But great work, everyone. We are going to find them, and we will take them down. Everyone cheers with him, and then he says to Sydney, come with me. We see the viper that's been arrested is now sitting in the interrogation room, and we see Sydney and her boss walk in, and the boss says to the viper, well, hello. And the viper says, my lawyer isn't here yet. And the boss and Sydney sit down, and Sydney says, we're quite aware of that, but this meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. and it's 9:20 now. The boss says, so let's talk. You were caught last night selling meth to a 16-year-old girl, which was caught on tape by our crew, and yet you're denying the fact that you even did it. So please, tell us the story. I can't wait to hear this one. I'm sure you thought long and hard about this one. And the viper's about to defend himself when all of a sudden, the door opens. We see Lindsay, the lawyer, walks in and says, excuse me, are you speaking to my client without his lawyer present? The boss says, and who are you? Lindsay says, I'm Lindsay Quinn. I'm this gentleman's lawyer, and you two are the DEA. Let me guess, you're a bunch of know-it-alls that want to frame someone who hasn't done anything wrong because you had nothing better to do with your time than to judge an innocent man? Is that the kind of people you are? And Sydney says, okay, well, if he's so innocent, then let's listen to what he has to say. The viper says, well, I was set up. A man who was part of this crew that you've been hearing about called the Vipers are definitely out there. I was going into a bar, and I was held at gunpoint by a man. He threatened to kill me if I didn't do this job for him. And Sydney says, okay, let me ask you this. Why did this man force you to give drugs to a young woman? Lindsay tries to say something, and Sydney says, let the man explain. And the viper says, the man threatened me. He wanted this deal done, and he knew that the DEA were on his ass, so he got me to do it. He got me to do the job so that I would get caught, and I'd be the one who would get locked up. Boy, did it work. And Sydney says, oh, so what you're saying is that we got the wrong guy, and that you're just an innocent man. Is that what you're telling us? And Lindsay says, now are you really going to turn him down when you don't have any evidence of this being a lie? We then see Sydney's boss laughing, and Lindsay says, is this funny to you? The boss says, yeah, that's one of my favorite bullshit stories I've heard my entire career. Definitely top 5 or 10. And Sydney says, okay, so let me ask you this. How come you're wearing the exact same clothes you were in 2 hours before you went to the bar, when we saw you driving by 2 hours later? We caught the same man, same height, same hair, same features, giving drugs to a young girl. Because to me, I'm pretty certain that we're looking at the same man here that we had in the pictures. And the Viper looks very nervous and says, he gave me his jacket. He wanted me to blend in. And Sydney says, but you had the same hairstyle before you walked into the bar. You changed your hair color too? Lindsay says, you both haven't been listening to him. He's telling you the truth, and I'd like some real listeners here. And Sydney gets up and says, well, you'll get the listeners you want, because the only person you're going to be talking to now is the court of law. And Lindsay says, you're not walking away until I talk about this. And Sydney and her boss start walking away, and Sydney says, you might want to add a little bit more to that story for the judge. Make sure to spice it up a little bit. Make it interesting for the judge before you put him to sleep. And then they walk away. Lindsay walks away, and Sydney's boss walks far enough away, and we see Sydney looks at Lindsay from a distance. And Lindsay says from the other end of the hall, tread lightly, Sydney. Currently, we see Sydney waking up, and we see she's tied up and sitting in the back seat. As she looks up at the front, and the woman who knocked her out is now driving, and she looks through the rearview mirror and sees Sydney is awake. The girl says, it didn't have to be this way. I told you I just wanted the keys. And Sydney says, you might want to let me go. And the woman laughs and says, and why exactly would I do that? And Sydney says, because I've got a group. A lot of people with a shitload of fighters and very little patience for people like you. And they will come looking. And the woman says, save the scare tactics, girl. You have no idea who I am. Just like I've got no idea who you are. I'm not looking to kill anybody today. And she turns her head and looks back and says, but don't test me. And we then see the car slowing down, and the woman says, no, come on! We see they ran out of gas, and the woman says, damn it! Sydney says, we're out of gas. Was gonna fill it up until I got a gun in my face. And the woman looks frustrated, and Sydney says, looks like our little road trip ends here, bitch. Oh, and by the way, next time, use tighter knots. Sydney grabs the woman by the neck and forces her hand onto her mouth until the woman passes out. The woman wakes up and is now tied up and held at gunpoint outside up against the car. And Sydney looks at her and says, welcome back. That was quite the stunt you pulled back there. The woman says, go ahead, kill me, please. It's the biggest favor anybody could do for me. And Sydney says, I wanted things to go peacefully, but you didn't let me. You knocked me out and tied me up. So don't start with your I want to die bullshit. And if we're being honest here, putting a bullet in your head would probably make the world a better place. The woman says, then get it over with. I've got a place a few miles north from here, stocked with guns and supplies. Take them. Bring them back to your people, and tell them you found it. And Sydney says, why didn't you kill me? The woman says, like I said, I wasn't looking to hurt you. I just had to get out of here. And Sydney says, why? The woman says, because. She kind of hesitates. There's a group, not too far from here. A few months ago, they killed everyone in my camp. Assassin type. I was coming back from a run, and when I came back, everyone was dead. I was looking through my friends' dead corpses waiting to find my husband dead with them, but he wasn't there. I've been out here ever since, looking for him. Sydney says, you know if he's alive? The woman says, I don't, but I'm not going to stop till I know. I haven't found a car able to take me anywhere around here. Yours was the first car I found that actually worked. Sydney says, you said you had supplies? The woman says, yeah. And Sydney says, okay, you're gonna take me there. The woman starts walking and says, can you lower your gun? And Sydney says, nah, I think I'm gonna hold on to it for a little bit. Move. And the woman says, tread lightly, girl. One hour later, they make it to a cabin, and the woman says, this is it. Sydney looks kind of emotional and says, you live here? The woman opens up the door, and they walk in. They walk in, and we see this place is old and in bad condition. We see cans of food and some guns stored, and we then see Sydney, and the woman says, look, I've caused you enough trouble, so take your guns and go. And Sydney asks, who were they? The woman turns around and says, I don't know, but all I know is that they're everywhere. It's just a matter of time before they find me. And if my husband's out there, I have to find him. And Sydney says, what's your name? The woman says, I'm Amelia. And his name is Ryan. And Sydney asks, so you never found a body? Amelia says, no, but I'm getting an answer, one way or another. And Sydney looks around and says, this isn't a life, Amelia. And Amelia says, what? Sydney says, living out here on your own like this? And if it's worth anything, can I give you a piece of advice? Amelia says, please. And Sydney says, you don't have to stop looking. You just can't run away from what you're living right now. And Amelia says, but I've got nothing left. No family, no friends. Everyone's an enemy now. And Sydney says, yeah, I said that too. We see them sit down and Sydney tells her, I was just like you, living out here by myself. And a good while after the world fell, I lost my sister. For a while, I didn't know where she was, so I did the same thing as you. I had a place just like this. I scared everyone that I saw away. Never trusted a single soul, no matter what anybody told me. I never stopped looking for her, until a man named Lincoln West found me. He and his friend Tom, they found me at my lowest point. But these guys were looking for a friend of their own, and I decided to help them. And guess what? Because I put my trust in people, and because I believed, I found my sister again. Amelia says, and where is she now? Sydney remembers Emma, and she says, she died not too long ago. And Amelia says, I'm sorry. And Sydney looks at her and says, it's okay. I'm starting to think there's a reason why God let me here. And I think I'm here to get you out. Away from this life. And Amelia looks at her with a small smile on her face and says, even after I knocked you out? Sydney says, well, hey, I got you back, so let's call this even. And Sydney says, I've got a lot of people, good people. We're in a town. I'm giving you the choice to come with me. But more importantly, you'll have more than just yourself looking for your husband. And if he's out here, I haven't found one single person that Lincoln has not been able to find. And Amelia says, okay, I've got a few bags. We can bring what we can. And Sydney says, where was your camp? Amelia says, it's only a few miles north. I never wanted to go too far unless he was looking for me. You sure we're going to be able to find him at your community? Sydney says, of course. And Amelia says, okay, because if he's out there, I want to know. I'd take a bullet for him. And when Sydney hears her say that, she looks sad because of what happened to her sister. Flashback to one day before the outbreak. We see the clock hits 12 o'clock. We see the high school kids walking through the halls and leaving, and we see Emma getting her stuff and getting ready to leave. But then, a boy named Andy comes and talks to her. He kisses Emma and says, was looking for you. Hey, me and the guys are gonna go to the skate park this afternoon around 2, if you wanna come. And Emma says, sure, I'll meet you there. My sister was picking me up. She took her lunch break off to pick me up though. And Andy says, oh, 2 hours? Oh, babe, I don't know. 2 hours? You think we can do that? I'd miss you like crazy. Emma kisses him and says, I'll see you at 2. And we see her walk out of school. Emma walks out and hops into the car with Sydney, and Sydney says, hey sis, how was the morning? Emma says, honestly good, but the best part though was Andy. He changed seats and sat right next to me at period 1. However, for the rest of the day, he left to go to his other classes. That's when it felt like a full day. Sydney says, so you and Andy, huh? Emma says, yeah, trust me, if you saw him, you'd understand. He's so charming. And then we hear something over the radio. The man who was arrested was claimed to be part of the Vipers. One of the biggest drug dealers known in the city of Washington, D.C., has now been sentenced to jail. And Emma tries to switch the station and Sydney says, hang on, I want to hear this. And the man on the radio says, and we now know it's a matter of time before their leader is revealed and arrested. Now, let's get back to this flesh eating, and Sydney says, keep running your mouth there. And Emma says, you think these rumors are true? Sydney says, well, Mom and Dad have been obsessing over this, but I honestly think they're just making this out to be something it's not. And Emma says, yeah, maybe. And Sydney says, you hungry? Emma says, sure, let me get my card. And Sydney says, no, it's on me. My treat, sis. Emma says, thanks. I'm feeling like Wendy's. We see them getting some food, and then Sydney drives Emma back home and drops her off and heads back to work. Emma walks in and says hey to her mom, Frankie, and says, hi mom, where's dad? Frankie says, oh, your dad's outside mowing the grass in the backyard. I'll say, since he's retired, he's really been making this place look like it's brand new again. And Emma says, cool. I told my friends I'd meet them at the skate park around 2. Is that okay? Frankie says, sure, sweetheart. Just be home by 6 for dinner. And Emma says, thanks, Mom. Two o'clock. We see Andy and a few of his buddies are skateboarding, and Andy walks over and kisses her and says, hey, babe, you okay? You seem different. Emma says, no, I'm fine. It's just, isn't this whole dead coming back thing starting to freak you out a bit? Andy says, babe, honestly, I think it's just a bunch of people trying to put things out there to grab some sort of attention, honestly. I think it's just fake news. And Emma says, yeah, that's what my sister said. And Andy says, come on, let's go join the guys. We see Lindsay walking out of the court, and she's now on her own. Her client went to jail, and she gets into the car and is calling someone. The person answers, and Lindsay says, they got him, Chris. Yeah, I know. And I've got a job for you if you're willing to listen. Currently, we see Sydney and Amelia are walking the roads after leaving the cabin, and they then stumble upon Amelia's old camp. But as we reveal, it's the same camp where Emma got killed. We see Sydney and Amelia walking through the ruins. Sydney starts crying and Amelia says, hey, what's going on? Sydney says, this is where she died. And Amelia says, the Vipers? They're the ones who killed your sister? Sydney says, and your camp. And she walks right where Emma died, but now her body is gone. Sydney then walks through the camp and she kills several deadheads. She's letting out all of her anger, killing one after another, but as she notices, one of the deadheads is breaking off from the rest. Sydney kills the rest of them, But when the last deadhead turns around, it's a reanimated Emma. We see the blood on her neck from where she got hit. Sydney then starts crying, and as she pulls herself together, Amelia kills her for Sydney, and they put her down. Flashback to one day before the outbreak. Sydney is driving home. We see her pulling into the driveway. She opens up the door and says, "Mom? Dad? I'm home." We don't hear anything. We then see blood on the floor. Sydney looks terrified and is saying, "Mom? Dad? Emma?" As she turns the corner to see Frankie and her husband is laying there dead on the kitchen floor. Sydney starts crying, and then we see a message written in blood on the covered door: "Tread lightly." And Sydney looks scared, furious, and devastated. But then we hear the TV in the living room is saying, "So all the rumors we've heard is actually happening. Police say there's people have been coming back and literally eating their friends and families alive. We know this type of situation can be very terrifying. We have heard from various people that if these acts continue, the city will go on full lockdown until this is under control." But then the power goes out. Sydney panics and is crying. We then see Emma is on her way back to the house. Sydney sees her coming from outside the window. She puts on a brave face and she goes outside, and Emma says, "Hey, the power is going out across the entire block. What's going on?" Sydney says, "Sis, do you trust me?" Emma says, "Yes, why?" Sydney says, "Then I need you to get in the car, okay?" Emma says, "Where are we going? What about Mom and Dad?" Sydney looks at her with the bravest face she can and says, "They're okay." And Emma asks, "Where are we going?" Sydney says, "We're leaving until these reanimated corpses are gone." And they drive away, and we see her put on a brave face for her little sister. They drive out of the city before things were about to fall. Two months after the outbreak. Sydney says, "You've been asking me about Mom and Dad. I didn't want to tell you then because things were getting too dangerous. But I think it's time you knew the truth." And Emma says, "Sis?" Sydney says, "You remember when I told you to get in the car and we were going to leave?" Emma says, "I did. And you still never told me why we left Dad and Mom." And Sydney says, "Well, they weren't eaten by the dead." She starts crying, and Emma says, "Sis?" Sydney says, "Before you came home, I had just gotten off of work. I was coming back, and when I walked in, they had both been murdered, and they were killed by someone." Emma says, "Wait. Are you telling me someone killed Mom and Dad and you didn't tell me?" Sydney says, "I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but I knew you'd never leave. And if you saw them, I knew you wouldn't go, and I didn't want to put you through the pain and fear that you were already feeling. And Emma is breaking down, and Sydney walks over and holds her and says, "Hey, you listen to me. You and me, we're gonna survive out here. I know it. Because like I said, whether it's 2 days or 2 years, I am never, you hear me? Never, ever gonna let anything happen to you." And Sydney holds her, and we see a few tears come down her face as she says, "I promise." Currently, Sydney and Amelia have buried Emma. Sydney is wiping her tears, and Amelia says, "You would have died for her. You didn't fail her. This world is just full of cruelty." And Sydney says, "Well, I'm not giving up. Your husband's still out here, and there's no room for another grave in this world." And Amelia says, "Thanks." And Sydney says, "Come on, we should get back." As they start walking away, Sydney's walkie-talkie is starting to go off. Sydney picks it up, and we hear Luke says, "This is Luke reporting to Sydney. Over." Sydney picks it up and says, "I'm here, Luke. What's going on?" Luke says, "Oh, Sydney, thank God. You need to get back home as soon as possible. Blake is..." His voice cuts out, and Sydney says, "Luke? Luke, you're breaking up. Luke?" And Sydney looks at Amelia and says, "We have to go." And they start running back, but then we hear Haley's voice over the walkie saying, "Please, if any of you are out there, please help me."